Was there ever a celebrity that said that you did him better than he did himself?
No, I don't think so. There are a few people that didn't like my impression,
Who
though.
didn't like what you did?
One I can think of off the top of my head was Paul Lynde.
Really?
Remember on Hollywood Squares,
Oh, yeah.
Paul Lynde? He hated my impression of him.
Why?
I have no idea why. Maybe I exaggerated him a little bit, you know. But
He exaggerated himself.
well, he was, yes.
Yeah.
But he hated it. And every time I did him on Hollywood Squares, the camera would go to him for a reaction, you know. And he'd look into the lens and go, "Who's he doing? Who's that? That's disgusting. Get a day job."
Did you ever get a cease and desist letter from somebody who said, "Don't ever do that to me again"?
No, I don't think I've ever had that, but I've had a few people say, you don't do me, I don't sound like that at all, and then the family's behind going, "Yes, he does." But you know, it's funny, with Paul Lynde, a lot of the one-liners he made up himself, but generally speaking, they were written for him. And I used to write down a lot of them because I did Hollywood Squares a lot. And I remember there was one that I thought was kind of amusing. Was one night Peter Marshall, who was the host, said this to Paul Lynde: "Paul, when is a person, do you think, legally dead? When the brain stops functioning, or when the heart stops beating?" You know what Paul said?
What?
"Oh, it would have to be when the heart stops beating. Good Lord, if we determined it by the brain stops functioning, we'd wipe out the Democratic Party."
Rich, you have been on every television show that most of us ever saw, going back, I mean, Ed Sullivan, Jimmy Dean, Judy Garland. It'd be easier to find a show you haven't been on. You hosted The Tonight Show.
I know, and yet I can't get on a television show today, except for yours.
And I don't
And I thank you for that.
Well,
I
thank
really
you
do
for
thank
coming.
you for that.
You know, you are as good as you've ever been, and you don't do it by just screaming out profanities at the audience and making us to feel like that's funny.
Yeah, well, a lot of comics are pretty blue these days.
Yeah.
You know, and even when we did the Dean Martin roast, the roasts weren't blue, you know.
Yeah.
The comedy was, well, a lot of people watch those roasts. You know, even today they say, well, there's nothing on TV, and we bring out an old Dean Martin show. And I did 24 of those Dean Martin roasts.
Wow. Those were great. Was Dean Martin, he was totally different than this image he projected, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. I one time after a roast, just out of curiosity, when we were leaving the dais, and I walked by where Dean was sitting, I picked up his glass and I went, and I took a little sip. Guess what?
What?
It was apple juice.
Apple juice.
It wasn't booze. So that was basically put on by him, you know.
Was he a fun guy to be around? Did you?
Oh, yeah.
Did you do him as well?
Oh, yeah, I did Dean. He was so quick. He was great at ad-libbing. I mean, he hated cue cards. And a lot of the times he ad-libbed, and the ad-libs were funnier than what they had written for him, you know? But he had a very unique style of Dean Martin. Oh, yeah. Did you people hear the news today? Yeah, the world's greatest crossword puzzle addict died. And John Scobie was his name, and tomorrow they're going to bury him 6 feet down and 3 feet across.
I've heard it said of you that one of the hardest people was Frank Sinatra.
Oh, yeah. And I do Frank Sinatra, but it's not 100%. I would say I sometimes get him, but it's tough to do Frank. Usually, if I want to do a good Frank Sinatra, I hit somebody.
That's all you got to do. You were one of the best at doing Richard Nixon. He gave you plenty of material, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Nixon was great. He really was. And Reagan, he was my all-time favorite.
And he loved what you did in his presence.
You know, when I performed at the White House, and I did a number of times, and one time I was there, and we usually talked after the function was over, and he would, you know, get in a corner with me, and then Nancy would say, "Honey, we're waiting for you in the next room for coffee." And he'd say, "Well, I know, but I'm telling Rich a story." And then she'd say, "Well, make it a short one." And I asked him one time, I said, "Is it true?" And I read this in some book somewhere, but is it true that you were the first choice to play the lead in Casablanca? And I'd read that somewhere.
Really?
You know what he said to me?
What?
"Well, yes, that's true, but unfortunately they gave the part to Ingrid Bergman."
What a great line.
But it's a great line, but if I had said you were going to play Rick, he wouldn't be able to say that. And I just happened to say the lead, and then he said, "Yes, but they gave it to Ingrid Bergman." And, you know, he was so funny. I remember one time I was at the White House as a guest, and they had Sri Lanka, what do you call him? The king of Sri Lanka, or the prince, or
the prime minister, maybe?
The prime minister of Sri Lanka, okay. And he was there, and I was invited as a guest, and I sat with the Reagans, and we listened to the president of Sri Lanka speak, and in the middle of the speech, he suddenly said, "You know, I learned a lot about the United States of America by watching Laurel and Hardy movies." I couldn't believe this. And at that point, Reagan leaned over to me and said, "Our kind of guy." So then, when his speech was over and everybody was prepared to leave and we're all just standing around chatting, Reagan went up to him and said, that was interesting, the way you talked about Laurel and Hardy, because I was a big fan of theirs too. I thought they were the best comics I'd ever seen. As a matter of fact, I think the best routine they ever did was Who's on First. And I looked at my then wife at the time and went, "Don't say anything." That was Bud Abbott and Lou Costello, but, you know, but anyway, Reagan said, "My favorite routine that they did was Who's on First." And the president of Sri Lanka then said, "What?" And Reagan said, "I think he was on second." And then the president of Sri Lanka said, "I don't understand." And he said, "He must have been in the outfield." They were doing the routine, for heaven's sake.
Oh, my God.
If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I hope you will now. The button is just below this video, and there's a little bell next to it. If you click on those, YouTube will reluctantly start letting you know when we've got a new video uploaded.